right? Now we are going to talk about static keyword, right? Just go by the literal meaning of a name, static. Static is what remains consistent. Static is what does not change often, right? Static is one which is not dynamic, right? Static is what remain consistent, what does not change, or what is not dynamic. That is what static keyword is, right? But I don't know why method is static, why variables are static. Can class be static? Can interface be static? Can methods in interface be static? I don't know about that. We are going to find answers for that. But as of now, if I just go by the literal meaning of static keyword, static is what does not change, what remains consistent, and which is not dynamic. Right. Now to understand further about static keyword, we need to understand two rules. Let's talk about rule number one. Rule number one is, which we talked about in a previous session also, that every object of my class has unique copy of unique copy of all non-static data members or non-static variables. Right. I'll just show you, or I'll just, make you understand about this point using example also. But rule number one is every object that you declare or you create as part of your class has got unique copies of all non-static data members, right? And the opposite of that is every object shares same copy of all static data members. There is a very big difference between these two statements. The first statement was talking about having a unique copy of all non-static data members. Second statement is talking about every object sharing the same copy of static data members. Right. Let's understand this very point through an example. All right. So here, if I just create this folder structure, a namespace, static keyword, and here if I create a class called, let's say, counter to understand static keyword, right? I have got a field called static. Let's make it non-static right now. I just commented out this field. Right now I have got a constructor. What I'm doing, I'm just incrementing the value of count variable. Right. I can also print that the value of count variable is, and I printed the value of count variable. I began the count variable with value 10. So it will print 11. But what if I create three objects of my class? So constructor will get invoked three times, right? This is first object, this is second object, this is third object, right? Three objects invoking constructor three times. Now what will be the value of count variable? Right? I was saying every object has has got a unique or distinct copy of non-static data members. That means every time the constructor will run and it will print the value of count variable as 11. It will not increment because every object is having a unique or its own copy of non-static data member. But the moment I make it static, the moment I make it one does not change, or which is consistent, now the value of count variable will increment from 11 to 12 to 13 because now the field is static in nature. All right. So this is how you can define static keyword. That static keyword is used in front of those fields, variables, method which are going to remain consistent across the entire project. If you want to take an example, let's say I've got 500 employees in an organization. Now the organization name for all employees, let's say, is ABC. That will be same. I can understand that the employee name will differ. I can understand that the employee ID will differ. Designation, salary, address, project, everything will differ. But the organization name and the organization address will be same for all employees. So why to waste unnecessary memory? Why to, you know, have the memory heaped up issues? So I need to choose the correct variable next time. You know, these fields should always be made as static. One which is going to remain consistent, one which is going to vary, I can make it non-static. I can understand that I need to create 500 indexes for 500 employees, right? Or more than that employees. If I've got a product in the retail e-commerce website, I understand that I've got one, you know, 10,000 or 100,000 products that I need to cater to. I can understand that. But if I am applying a loyalty, a promotion coupon code, that should be made as static. Or, you know, if some like there is buy one get one or BOGO lap or different kind of schemes that are there, that should be made as static, right? Which brings us to our second rule, which is, you know, this that static fields or static methods can be used by static fields or static method can be used or can be accessed by both static as well as non-static method or non-static field, right? But vice versa is not true. Basically what I mean is static field can be accessed by static method only. Basically static method cannot access non-static field or non-static method, right? Because in the first place I made fields as static because that is going to remain consistent. Static methods are specially designed for static field. So static method cannot have non-static field or non-static method. But objects are given the access to static fields or static method. Let's see this through an example. Alright, let me just take that organization example only. Alright, let's say this is the class. Now I have got a static field, let's say that is string and that is organization name. This is static field and I can understand that I have got, ID of an employee. I've got age of an employee. This is what will create the different characteristics. Let's say I've got a name of an employee. Alright, these are three non-static fields. Right, I created one constructor. Alright, in the constructor I said you will give me the employee ID, you will give me the employee age, and you will give me the employee name. Alright, and what you will give me, I will simply set the data in the instance variable with the help of this keyword. Right, this employee name is equal to employee name. This employee age is equal to employee age. Constructor is all set. Right, now as part of main method I can create objects for every employee. Right, let's say I gave, you know, let's say I, you know, created the first employee data. Right, non-static can access both static as well as non-static field. All right, so here I gave, let's say the employee ID is 123, age is let's say 25, and name is let's say, you know, X. But when I need to set the, or when I need to change the organization name, so I thought of creating a, static method if someone needs to change the organization name. Right, let's say you'll give a new organization name. All I will do, I will simply change the static field with what you will give to me. Alright, so this data will be set. Now if I need to have one more non-static method, this non-static method can print the employee ID. Right, it can print the employee age, and it can print the employee name. So it can access the, right, it can access the non-static fields, this non-static method, but at the same time it can also access the static field, and the organization name is, here it printed the static field called organization name. So a static field or a non-static method accessing both non-static fields as well as static fields, because at least I should give the access to objects to use static field. So now ID will come as 123, name will come as 25, sorry, ID will come as 123, age will be 25, name is X, and the organization name is ABC. Right, so the data should differ for objects, organization name should remain the same. Right, if I would have created another organization object with let's say E2, I said in the beginning, let's say I've got 500 employees. This time the age is 26, the ID is 234, and the name is let's say Y. When I will call display method with this object, everything will change, but organization name will remain same because that is static, that is consistent, that is not dynamic. Right, so static method only for static fields. Non-static method can have static as well as non-static field. If I do a silly mistake of having a non-static field as part of static method, I will get a compilation error that cannot make a static reference to a non-static field employee ID. Right, I can't do that. Alright, so these are the two rules. If I understand these two rules well, I can very well explain the role, use, relevance of static keyword. Static fields, right? Static method can access static fields only. Static method cannot access non-static field or non-static method. Similarly, static field or static method can be accessed by non-static field or non-static method. That can happen. And the first rule was every object that you declare as part of a class has its own copy of non-static field, and every object that you create as part of your class shares the same copy of static fields. What is the use of writing static method? You have directly declared it in variable, right? No, I could have avoided that also. I could have avoided that. Here, let's say I don't do this, right? And since it is a static method, I could have called directly using the class name. This is the class name. I could have called organization name. Let's say I give a organization name as XYZ. So it will print ID, age and name. This time the organization name will be XYZ for both objects. Right. I could have accessed it directly using the class name static method. I cannot access a class name, I cannot access a non-static method with class name. Non-static method can only be accessed with the object of a class. Alright. So from memory management of point of view also, static keyword makes good sense. Right, that why to create 500 indexes if I have got 500 employees in my organization, right? Those fields should be static. Can constructors be static? All right, so constructors, this is a constructor. Constructors are created for objects. Static is created for class, so they are opposite to each other. If I try to use static keyword in front of a constructor, it will give me a compilation error. It's an illegal modifier for constructor. Only public, private or protected are permitted. Why? Because constructor is for a object, whereas static is for a class. They are two different things. Right. Similarly, a class cannot be static. Right. Fields in a class can be static. Interface can also not be static, right? But methods within an interface can be static. It can be accessed in a static way. That is up to the designer. That is up to the, you know, the programmer. No, I did not. What I did, I just simply, let's say I need to create a constructor. I did this. There is no shortcut, right? I have to manually write it in Eclipse. I did not use any shortcut. I have got other shortcuts that I can use, but I did not use the shortcut to create constructors. Alright, so this is why static keyword. Now there are many APIs in Java. Constructor cannot be static, right? Now there are many keywords there are many methods in Java which are static in nature. For example, if you just check the adder utility, right, there is a java.lang.math class, right, whose job is to you know add, like math class has all these methods, and it has got, you know I can have add method also, minimum method also, right? Let's say I have got a minimum method. I give two numbers. Now their functionalities are all same, consistent, so I can do this. I can directly access that with the help of a class name. My basic point is, whenever you see any method using directly with the class, basically that method is static in nature, right? Maximum can be used. All right. Subtraction, multiplication, addition, all those methods can be used, it will give me the output 3. Right, there are some very short questions basically just to judge your knowledge. Why main method is static? Why? Right, yes, in the previous session we talked about that JDK looks for a main method that has got string array arguments. Right, now for static methods objects are not required to be created. Now main method is static so that JDK does not require objects to be created to access the static method. Right, that's the reason main method is static, that no object creation is required, no object creation should be required, no extra memory allocation should be done. Alright, now there is another concept called static initializer block. See, many times we think that main is the first method that gets executed. This is a static initializer block. See, if I just write one simple statement in this very static initializer block, you will see the static initializer block getting executed even before main method getting executed. Right? See, every requirement of ours is taken into consideration. Before main method, static initializer block is executed. Why static initializer block is used? Just to initialize static variable. Now in the previous session we talked about that constructors are created to make sure that all non-static variables are initialized. Similarly, static initializer block is used or created to make sure that all static variables are initialized before the static methods are accessed, can be accessed. Right, basically let's say I have got a static variable called data1. Right, and I have got a static or a non-static or an instance variable as data2. Now this is my static initializer block. Right, and I initialized my static you know static variable with value, let's say 12. I printed also that before main method is going to access this field, I have initialized the static field called data1. Right, and I have got this non-static initializer block also. This is a non-static initializer block which is a alternative or a replacement to constructor, right, whose job is to make sure that all non-static variables are initialized. Right, non-static initializer block, it is an alternative to constructor. Right, you should not be using it if you are already using constructor. And the value of non-static variable data2 is, I can simply do it like this. Right, if I try to do a similar thing with constructor, which I'll show you, right, but before main method gets executed, if I try to do anything, right, let's just write it down, main method, what will print on console? First, static initializer block will get executed automatically. I am not creating an object. So will this execute? Because I said it's an alternative to constructor. It just executed a static initializer block and main method. Non-static initializer block did not execute. But if I would have created the object of my class, now a non-static initializer block should execute because it's an alternative to constructor. Now when I run this piece of code, you see I have my static initializer block gets executed, main method line, then this non-static initializer block gets executed because it's an alternative to constructor. If you have, mistakenly, unknowingly created a constructor also, then it's a repetitive thing that you just did. It's a repetitive method definition which you just did. Why? Because you have already got static initialize, or rather non-static initializer block. Right? There was no need of constructor then. Right? This will also execute after non-static initializer block gets executed. But it was a repetitive thing because we already saw that this non-static initializer block also got executed on its own because you were creating the object. Now, basically static initializer block is for static variables. It's an it's like the constructor for static variables, and non-static initializer block or constructor is for non-static variables because their job is to make sure that non-static variables are initialized before object creation, right? So that methods can be invoked with the correct values. Similarly, the job of static initializer block is to make sure that all, static variables are initialized before any static method can, before any static method is executed. All right. So this is what static and non-static initializer block is. Okay. Now, why do we do this? For example, in hash map, before using hash map, you want to populate hash map. In the for loop performance testing, I use static initializer block to populate the data. Right, remember I did this before I actually start using the list. If I'm using, like I did for array list. If I'm using databases, I could load the driver, do the connection using static initializer block. If I have to load the properties file, before reading it, I can do as part of static initializer block. I could call the config.load method, get resource as stream and load the properties file. Similarly, class.forName for loading the driver for connecting to the database. All those activities could be performed as part of static initializer block before static methods can be executed. Right, and we understood this very concept with this example also, with this fields also. Right, any questions, guys?